Okay, so I just got back from the new Rivian space that opened up today morning in Vancouver, BC. And this is in fact actually the first Rivian space that opened in all of Canada. So this is the first Rivian showroom where you could actually check out their cars in Canada. And for me, I've seen a lot of Rivian cars on the street lately, and I've seen them like pretty much every second day, if not every day at this point. But at the same time, I haven't actually gotten a chance to like explore the car in and out. So while checking out the car today morning, I really got to check out all the small details and like everything inside out, all the big features like the gear tunnel or even the frunk. And more importantly, I actually got to go on a demo drive with a Rivian employee. So I really got a taste of how the car actually drives and how it performs. And I gotta say, I am impressed. Now, to be honest, I did have a bias for Rivian before already. I really like their trucks, and fine, yeah, it's kind of subjective, but I really do like what they make. And that is why I have a bias. But to be honest, I personally believe that this is the only electric vehicle that I can really see myself buying right now, despite the expensive prices. But regardless, in my opinion at least, this is one of the nicest electric vehicles on the market right now as of today. And dare I say, this is actually one of the only vehicles that does provide a high level of value for what you pay for it. So anyways, let's take a look at this car and what I like about it, what I dislike, and what I really noticed about it overall, and why this car actually did impress me. So for those of you that don't know Rivian is an electric car company founded in 2009, and they largely focus on an outdoor themed platform for electric cars for activities such as hiking, camping, off-roading, and all of that. Now currently they offer two cars on their platform. One is the R1T, which is a small size pickup, and the second is the R1S, which is a 7-seater SUV. Now both the R1T and R1S are basically the same for the first 60-ish%, and then the back, as you would expect, is a bed on the truck and an extra 2 seats and a trunk on the SUV. Now aside from that, from what I've been told, the cars are largely the same aside from like the backside. So basically you get the same battery, the same driving quality for the most part, and even like the same infotainment, the same features. And they're pretty closely priced, although I do believe the SUV is a bit more expensive. But aside from that, you basically get the same package with either of them. Now, as I mentioned before, these are cars that I at this point see at least every second day, if not every day on the road. And they are nice cars, they do catch my attention. Maybe it might just be because I really like the car overall, and it's personally something that I tend to notice more. But yeah, other than that, as I mentioned before, this is my first time checking out the car, and I was truly impressed, even though I do have a bias. I didn't expect it to be this good, and some of the downsides I did expect were not as big as I thought. So anyways, now let's get into the car and check out what I really like about it and dislike. Now walking up to the car, the first thing you obviously notice is the exterior, and I've already mentioned a couple of times in this video, I've seen this car a bunch of times on the road. However, when it's standing still in front of you, you definitely notice some smaller details that you don't really notice when it's zooming by on the street. Now the first thing I want to talk about is the headlights. So the headlights are definitely a subjective design. I think a lot of people at this point are at least used to it, and a lot of us do like it, including myself. But there are people that don't like it, and I mean, like, I kind of get it. It's not exactly the more traditional design, but I think it's still pretty nice. So if I had to describe the front of the car, it's basically this long light bar that wraps around the edges of the front, and then you have two headlights that are on the light bar. So they're oval headlights, and they're actually pretty cool because if you look on the inside of the headlights, you see these nice little light bars, and they're really cool. They wrap around the headlight, and inside the headlight you see these 4 bulbs, and then you see the Rivian and the Rivian logo, which is obviously they're going to brand it. But it is a headlight design that I haven't really seen around before, and I think it's pretty cool overall. It's something that you really notice, and they've really put the close attention to detail. Now moving behind the headlights, you also get this really big frunk. I've seen YouTube videos of people fitting people inside it. I'm not going to try that at a showroom, so it's something that you can definitely check out on YouTube though. But yeah, that does tell you about how many things you can fit in it. There's definitely a lot of at least groceries you can fit in there if you don't want to utilize the bed. Now, going on to the rest of the car, let's talk about the paint. Now, the R1T, the truck that was there, it was in white, and I would arguably say that this is probably the only color I don't like Rivian's in. It's just something about it. It makes it look like an old F-150, like back in the 2000s, maybe even the late 90s. And it's just generally like, it feels like an old truck. It doesn't look like something new. So I personally don't like it. And even in person, it didn't really look clean. But aside from that, there are a lot of color options that you do get with the Rivian, and that is something that I really like. Now, the R1S that was on site was in, I believe it was limestone gray, which I actually personally like as my favorite color. And this is a partial bias because the Tacoma we have at home is also in cement gray, which is pretty similar, but it's more gray instead of the more turquoise leaning limestone on the Rivian. But I think it's still pretty cool. It looks slightly different in different shades, which I do definitely think is, once again, pretty cool. But that is the color that I would go for if I was buying a Rivian. But aside from that, as I mentioned, there are a ton of other colors and they had them on display there. Now, another thing I did not expect and I was completely shocked by was the fact that I actually like the SUV exterior better than the truck. And it's something about like the overall shape, but I think the SUV exterior definitely did look nicer. And my friend that was with me at the moment did say the exact same comment, and I don't know, it's just something that I didn't really expect since I usually like trucks better than SUVs. But I guess I would still personally buy the truck if I was the one buying it. But the SUV exterior definitely does look nicer in person. Now, moving on to the back portion, just going over the SUV, it's pretty simple. It's what you would expect. It's two small seats, and I'll talk about those seats later. And you also get this trunk, nothing too special. Now, on the truck, on the other hand, you do get a gear tunnel, which is pretty cool. And it's basically a tunnel which is for storage, and it goes from one end of the truck to another. And it's not something that I believe I've seen on any vehicle in general, like not even just trucks, but I've never seen this at all. And it's something that's pretty cool. I'm not sure why any other company hasn't thought of this before, but it's something that's great because electric cars have a lot of empty space on the inside, and that is a great way to utilize the space. Now, the gear tunnel can definitely fit a lot of stuff. In fact, I've seen YouTube videos of people fitting other people inside. I'm probably not going to go to a showroom and try doing that, but I trust a YouTube video and say you can probably fit a thin enough person inside the gear tunnel. Now, also the gear tunnel flaps or doors or hinges or whatever you want to call them, they're pretty cool. They can support a lot of weight from what I've seen online. Once again, not going to try that at a showroom, but they did seem pretty sturdy for the time I was there. And aside from that, let's move on to the back portion of the truck. So you get a bed, which is probably one of the biggest things I was disappointed about, because it seemed like it was a 4 or 4.5 foot bed. And for most trucks, you would at least get a 5.5 foot bed as your smallest option. Here, your 4.5 foot bed is the biggest option, or in fact, the only option you get. And once again, with the Tacoma we have at home, now Tacomas are pretty reasonable size. They're small size pickups and they're pretty comparable to Rivians, but even that has a minimum 5.5 foot bed. So the 4.5 foot bed on the Rivian was pretty disappointing. Now, yeah, sure, you have the frunk and you have the gear tunnel, but I still believe that a 5.5 foot bed would have been nicer in case you're like taking wood or you're taking an ATV or laundry machines or any lugging that you're doing for work or personal purposes. It would be nice to have that more convenient bed. But regardless, at least it does have a bed. It's bigger than a trunk, but I still do think that a 5.5 foot bed would have been nicer. Now, finally at the back on both the SUV and the truck, you do get this big light bar once again, and it's pretty much constantly red, except for one thing that I noticed, which I believe when it's charging, the bottom portion of the light bar does turn green, which is a pretty cool touch. Now, one of the last things I want to talk about is the yellow accents. And these are pretty cool. You'll spot them all over the car, whether it be the text on the bottom or even the brake calipers. And it's pretty cool. It's a nice touch. It especially goes great with the green Rivians, which it's a very nice combination. Now, moving on to the interior of the truck, the first thing you're going to notice is the big dashboard. And the dashboard, in my opinion, was pretty nice. It had a big screen and a small screen. Now, starting off with a smaller screen, it is your gauge cluster, and it's pretty simple. It has your street view on the side, and then it's going to have your speed and all the other necessary details. Nothing too fancy about it, and it is pretty normal. I like the minimalistic design, and that's pretty great. Now the bigger screen, on the other hand, actually does a lot more, because this is your infotainment screen. And this bigger screen was actually surprisingly very responsive, and I did not expect it to be like that, and that's great because from what I've heard, they do have a lot of Tesla engineers on the Rivian team, which is great since they've carried on that technology from Teslas to Rivians. And the Tacoma or even the Lexus that I use at home, they're not exactly the most responsive screens. Like, they work, but they do lag a lot of the times, especially on the maps, and it's just great to have a really responsive screen in your truck, especially when you're trying to use it in traffic or you're trying to find a new route on the map, and it's just something that works. But yeah, aside from that, it has everything you're gonna want on a smart truck. So it has your maps, it has all of your car settings, it has, I believe, your heated seats and ventilated seats and all of that too. Basically, once again, everything that you're going to find on a Tesla, you'll find it on the Rivian too. And one of the coolest things that I really like is, once again, a ripoff of a Tesla feature, and it's Rivian's own version of Sentry mode, which is your car is always recording from its cameras, and it's basically a dash cam, but without having to install an actual separate dash cam and pay extra money for it. Now, I believe every car should have this, not just Rivians and Teslas, but it's great to see that some cars are adopting this. Now, one of the last things I want to mention is OTA updates. Now, I didn't even realize anything about over-the-air updates until our demo drive employee did mention, oh yeah, we're going to get Spotify sign-ins next week, which made me realize that a lot of cars now, especially Ford, GM, and all these other electric car manufacturers, are installing OTA over-the-air updates on their screens, which is great because it's just like our iPhones, which is you get software updates pretty regularly to keep your phone running and getting new features and all of that stuff. And similarly, you get new safety features or new performance features or updates to keep your car running and all that stuff, which is great because now you can have your car getting better over time instead of depreciating over time. But yeah, that's enough about the car software. Let's take a look about some of the actual physical stuff inside the car. Now, one of the biggest things that contribute to how the car feels is the ceiling on the top, and it's a panoramic sunroof. It's great, it lets a lot of light in, but it's also very heavily tinted, so you're not going to be burning in the sun, which is great because they don't have a cover for the roof. It's just open all the time. But yeah, aside from that, it's great. It has all the convenient features of a glass sunroof. It lets light in, and you can also see above, so it's great for camping. It's great for off-roading, where you want to see trees outside or all of that stuff. And all in all, it just gives the car an open feeling to it. Like, you have the sky on top and you have windows on your side. It just feels very open, which is great for a small size pickup truck. Now, another thing I want to talk about is the seats. The seats are very comfortable. I know the front seats were ventilated. I want to say the back seats are ventilated too, but I'm not 100% sure about that. But they're great. They're very reminiscent of more luxury cars, such as Lexuses or even Range Rovers and all those other high-end cars, which is great because it's not something you really see on Teslas or any of these other electric cars that are coming out nowadays, and you really see Tesla especially cheapening out on their interior. So this was great for Rivian, and they have really nice, comfortable seats, and I'd suspect this is going to be a great road trip car. Now, on the topic of the seat quality, the overall quality of the interior is very great. Like, I'd give it at least an 8 or a 9 out of 10. It's great. It doesn't have any moving parts or any creaking parts or anything like that. Everything feels like a very great finish. Even the wood on the dashboard feels great. It feels like real wood, which is something that I don't even feel on my Lexus at home, which it just feels like very plasticky on that. But here, the wood actually does feel very real, and who knows, maybe it might even be real wood, but it is very great. It's great to see. And once again, all the parts are great. Nothing moving, nothing breaking, nothing creaking, none of that bad stuff. Now, once again, I mentioned before that this is a small pickup truck and the ceiling does make it feel more open. But let's be honest, it is still a small pickup truck. You're not going to get a huge amount of space as much as you're going to get on a big Denali or F-150 or anything. And it's more comparable to a Tacoma. But from what I realized, it does have slightly more space than a Tacoma. It's something more like maybe a RAV4 or maybe even not a RAV4, maybe a bit smaller, but it's definitely bigger than a Tacoma. So if you do have a Tacoma or a Ford Maverick or a Ford Ranger even, you'll know that this is slightly more open, which is great. On our demo drive, we were sitting 3 people in the back, and we all had a little bit of space between us, which is great, which means it fits a lot of people, and especially for kids, you'll be completely fine. Now, as I've also mentioned earlier in the video, the SUV actually has 2 seats in the back, Now, from what I've seen on YouTube and what I saw in person, the seats are pretty tight. You're gonna have to either sit cross-legged, or you're only gonna fit small children or even adults that are under the height of 5 foot. So basically it's great for children, but anybody other than that, you're probably better off just using the front seats or even the middle seats. But yeah, aside from that, there's 3 finishes you can get your interior in. I got to check out black and white, and there's also apparently a green interior on their website, but I didn't get to see it in person. But I think it looks great, and I really gotta see it in person to really decide if it's something for me or something that's not for me. But on the website, it looks definitely different than whatever's on the market right now. But once again, you gotta see it in person to actually know how it looks. Now let's move on to the biggest part of this video, and that will be the demo drive, which lasted about 20 minutes, and it was pretty cool. We checked out a bunch of neighborhood streets, we went uphill, downhill, and we even went on a pretty busy street, and we checked out 0 to 60 and all of that.
3, 2, 1. Oh my god!
So let's talk about how the demo drive really went. So first thing first, let's talk about comfort. Now, one of the biggest things I was really surprised by was the overall drive quality. Now, this is something where I did have my expectations set quite low, primarily because I've sat in the Tacoma a lot at home. I've gone on drives on it, pretty long drives, also short drives in different cities. And I've also sat in a couple of Model 3s, and both of them did not have great ride quality. It was subpar. It wasn't horrible, but at the same time, it wasn't something like the Lexus, which I actually do drive pretty often. Now, when I thought of the Rivian, I kind of did expect it to be more of a combo between the Tacoma and the Tesla. So having great ride quality was not really on the list of what I thought it would do great. But it was actually quite smooth, and maybe it's just because I didn't expect it, but it was pretty great. Now, you may want to know that we were on the 20-inch all-terrain wheels, which may make a difference, but I don't think it might make a huge difference to the point where the ride quality completely changes. But the standard is 21-inch road wheels, and we were riding on the 20-inch all-terrain wheels. But overall, I think it's not going to make a huge difference, and I was definitely still impressed by the ride quality. Now, on that topic, it was also very quiet inside, which is something that's pretty standard for electric cars. I haven't sat in a ton of them. I've sat in Teslas a couple of times. Now, my problem with Teslas, on the other hand, is there's a lot of road noise. Now, for those of you that don't know, electric cars are very quiet because they don't have any engine inside them. But Teslas don't do a great deal with this because they don't have great insulation, and that makes a lot of road noise come inside the car, and this isn't something that I am personally happy with in Teslas. Now, the road noise on the Rivian, on the other hand, was pretty minimal, and that is something that I definitely liked. It's something that gives a more luxury feeling to the car, which once again, it's something that you definitely want at that price point, and it's something that's great to have. Now, aside from that, another thing I definitely did notice was the pedal driving, which is on electric cars, you do have a lot of regen braking. And in our specific drive, we had the regen braking strength set to the highest. So what this means is when you let go of the pedal, so you let go of the acceleration pedal, and it comes to an immediate stop. Now, this immediate stop, something that I really heard about Teslas and felt myself is this immediate stop is a pretty harsh jerk, and Teslas don't have smooth driving like that. Like, you let go of the accelerator a bit and it completely makes you like halt to a jerk. Now, the Rivian, on the other hand, yeah, it's a pretty immediate stop, but it also does stop smoothly to the point where like you're kind of like this, not straight back, if that makes any sense. But yeah, that is definitely something that I did appreciate, having great regen braking, because once again, this is something that does add to your battery too. So like turning it off is gonna definitely make your mileage go down, and it's gonna result in you having to charge the car a lot. So having regen braking is great, especially when it works too. And this also means you don't have to use the brake pedal almost at all. So this is great, this is convenient. So using only one pedal, like down and off, that's great to use. Now, on the topic of regen braking, you also have instant acceleration.
We're gonna go 3, 2, 1. Oh my god!
And it's something you definitely gotta feel to know what I'm talking about. A video is not gonna do justice. But the Rivian has a 0 to 60 in, I believe, 3.5 seconds on the quad motor that we tested. And if you notice, it is very instant acceleration. My head and my body all in all just slammed back, which is great. It's very exhilarating, and it's something that you're going to get when you slam the accelerator down. And once again, 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds. That's very fast. Now, aside from the whole drive quality thing, I think I've done a pretty good job at mentioning everything else that you need to know. The seats are very comfortable, the tint is great, we weren't burning in the sun thanks to a sunroof or anything. But yeah, overall, I was pretty impressed by the car, I was satisfied. Once again, this is something that I would definitely like to buy. So now that we talked about my experience with Rivians and what I like, what I don't like, let's talk about why I was so impressed by this car and why I definitely think this is probably my favorite electric car. And this is probably the only electric car that I would ever even consider buying. Well, you see, as I mentioned a couple times in this video, I've sat in Teslas a couple times and I've already gone over my problems. I don't like the ride quality, I don't like the creaking. Yeah, fine, the software is great, but when you buy a car, especially at that price point, you definitely want it to perform like a car, and especially a luxury car for like a $70,000 Canadian Model 3. You definitely want it to be a car that at least doesn't have any panel gaps or creaking parts. And that is why I outright don't like Teslas. Now, my experience is largely for Lexus and also the Toyota Tacoma. Now, on our Lexus SUV, which is the Lexus RX, ride quality is great, smooth and everything. And that is something I do want an electric car to be like. However, the form is an SUV and rather mid-sized SUV. So maybe a more of a Rivian form is something I definitely would like. And once again, this is something I definitely like more than a Tesla, the Lexus. I do absolutely love it. Now, moving on to the last car I've had a lot of experience with, which is the Toyota Tacoma. It is a great value for what we bought it at, and it's a great form, but once again, same issue. I don't like the drive quality. It uses a ton of gas, especially for my dad who primarily uses it. He drives a lot and it's a ton of gas mileage on that, and it's not great. So when you combine all the stuff I like on these cars, the software experience on Teslas, the great drive quality and the comfort, all the luxury on the Lexus, and the overall form of the Toyota Tacoma, what you do really get is the electric Rivian, which I definitely really like. And this is why this is probably the only car I would prefer. I also think it does knock out all of the other competition from the ballpark. Because if you look at some of the biggest competitors, which is Tesla, once again, I've mentioned, Tesla is something else. It's not on the same level as Rivian. It's great software experience, great charging and everything. But once again, not a great drive quality, especially for somebody that's been driving something that's nicer. Now, going on to the F-150 Lightning, which is also something that this gets compared to a lot. The F-150 Lightning is not very special, if you know what I mean. Like, it's basically the gas F-150, but with a front trunk, a battery, and a bigger screen, and they called it a day. So it doesn't really feel special. It's great for people that want something that feels like a gas car, but they don't want to pay for gas, and that's great for them. But for me, I would definitely like something that's unique, once again, like a Rivian. And the other competitions are the Hummer Electric and the Cybertruck, which the Cybertruck's not even on the road, but let's still include that. Cybertruck and the Hummer Electric, they're just very big, and honestly, I believe they should be illegal within 5 miles of any school zone. But aside from that, I don't think there's any other big competition to Rivian, which is why I personally do really love the Rivian. Now that goes on to the next question. Would I buy it? Am I buying it anytime soon? In this car market, with all these prices, absolutely not. But if I had the money, I definitely would. But once again, that's definitely way out of my budget, and I would definitely buy it if they had a cheaper car, but for that, definitely not. Now, one last thing I wanted to mention before closing off this video is all the rumblings about the upcoming R2 platform from Rivian. And I believe even a Rivian official said that like the upcoming R2 platform is going to have an R2 SUV, which costs between 40 to 60k USD, which is significantly cheaper than the current lineup. And it does compete with something like the Mustang Mach-E or the Model Y. So it would be great to see a lot of the features that we see in Rivian currently, but in a different package for a less price. But yeah, that also means Rivian's gonna definitely expand, which is why I definitely believe in the future of Rivian. So I think it's great to invest in this company. This isn't financial advice, but I definitely think this is a company that's gonna grow in the future, and I can't wait to see what they come up with. So if you like this video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more future videos like this, and I'll see you in the next video.